This is an infinite cobblestone generator in Minecraft, and this is one I just built out of LEGO parts. And it actually works thanks to some really cool underground mechanisms that are like real life redstone. Wow. This machine has so many awesome features, and I'll show you all of them. Most importantly, I needed water and lava. When they mix, a new cobblestone is created. Then a piston will push the new cobblestone out of the way so more cobblestone can be formed. At the end of the line of cobblestone, I wanted to make it look like Steve is mining it with a diamond pickaxe. There would be a floor to support all the cobblestone except the final one. But the piston will apply enough pressure to hold this final cobblestone in place until Steve mines it. When the piston releases pressure, the cobblestone will fall onto a conveyor to get on this lift and be recycled back to the water and lava so the process can be endless. First I had to set the scale. Minecraft blocks are cubes, so I built most of my items as cubes too. With LEGO parts, this can be achieved by adding a plate and tile to a brick, or connecting 4 plates and 1 tile. The cobblestone build came first. After that, I designed the piston rod. Next, I built the piston housing. The ram didn't move freely in this housing though, so I designed another housing with 1 open wall. I wasn't sure which of these designs would end up being better, so I kept both around just in case. After the piston, I created the water. The water and lava are both a little bland, so I'll make them more interesting later. This is already starting to look like the game, but there's more to be done. Building a scale model of Steve and a diamond pickaxe came next. I designed a mechanism that runs through Steve's arms to make him able to mine. Typically I'd use an axle, but this piece doesn't come in the right color, so I changed out this 1x4 brick for these instead, and used this bar and short pin to accomplish the same thing. It was time to build the machine's internal mechanism. The first thing I needed was a lift. Of course, gear racks were the first thought I had, but they would make the machine very tall. I tried this parallel lift arm mechanism next, but it was unstable and the cobblestone wouldn't travel in a straight line upwards, so I landed on a scissor lift. The scissor lift has a parallel table, which ended up working very well. I eventually added some vertical guides, so that the table wouldn't tip when the lift was extended. The only problem with a scissor lift is how hard it is to get the lift out of the collapsed position. I tried rubber bands here, and also here. Those helped, but added other effects I didn't want, like the cobblestone shooting off the top of the lift. So I decided to fix that a different way. I picked an NXT motor instead of an EV3 motor for ease of attaching to a base plate, and I got the lift motorized. I thought about moving the motor to a more convenient place using small bevel gears like this one, but the backlash caused the scissor lift not to function properly, so that idea was out. Next I was about to add a conveyor, but as I was testing out an idea for it, I realized that a ramp could bring the cobblestone back to the lift after it was mined, which would eliminate the need for an extra motor. So I got started on building a frame for the ramp, and then I built the ramp itself to fit a cobblestone block. I tested it out and realized I would need a wall on each side of the lift to align the cobblestone, so I put these slopes on a plate and gave it a test. Then I built some supports for the alignment walls. These worked great for alignment, but they also were the key to the scissor lift problem because they raised the scissor lift out of its collapsed position. I put one on the other side too. These had to rotate out of the way so the scissor lift could actuate, but they had to turn in opposite directions. In one fell swoop I built a wall, gear train, and motorized the mechanism. That was looking phenomenal. Next I designed some smooth stone slabs. I started putting in the tops of grass blocks, the smooth stone slabs, and the water and lava. I used slabs because in Minecraft they contain the water and lava, but will allow us to see most of them still. I needed enough clearance for the cobblestone to appear near the water, lava, and piston, so I left a half stud gap on each side of the scissor lift table. The piston came next. The mechanism was a little complex, so I had to try a couple of designs, but eventually I got one that worked. I built dirt walls and mounted the piston frame onto them. I added a touch sensor so the piston won't over travel. I had to interface the piston rod with the motorized gear train somehow. This one could rotate, This one didn't fit the piston frame. This one didn't look accurate to the game. So finally, this is the one I settled on. It fits the frame, meshes with the driving gear, and looks accurate. It looks really good, and when the mechanism is covered, it will look just like the game. Next, I built a back wall so the cobblestone would fall onto the ramp correctly. I used these at first, but the cobblestone would catch on these pinholes and not fall. Next, I built some grass blocks here to vary the terrain and also for Steve to stand on while mining the cobblestone. He was placed here, but I wanted him to be rotated like this, so I added a green 1x1 round plate for him to stand on. He wasn't very stable yet, but I added a couple of supports later. I left part of the dirt blocks hollow to hide this special mechanism that will allow Steve to mine the cobblestone. This white bar connects to the arm with the pickaxe, so that when this thin tan lift arm moves, Steve swings his diamond pickaxe. To hide the mechanism some more, I ran the bar through an arch and used this modified brick to allow more room for the mechanism. Too bad I don't have one in brown. Next, I attach this linkage and rubber band so that when the axle is raised and lowered, the arm swings. I attached a motor and cam to get this axle moving quickly to simulate a fast mining motion. The machine is almost ready to run. The last thing to attach is the controller, so I added these lift arms, attached the EV3, and then used this wire management technique to wire the motors and other instrumentation. After writing a quick program, it was ready to run. My excitement was short-lived though, because after a quick test, I realized my initial plan of the piston holding the final cobblestone wasn't going to cut it. Even with fast enough movement and enough pressure, the cobblestone would still fall a few centimeters, which didn't look very good. So I needed one last thing. I'd already used 4 motors, which is the most one EV3 can typically control. So I picked this alignment motor to do more than one task. I added some gears here to get the correct direction of rotation, and then some U-joints and axles to get the motion to this side of the machine. I attempted to use this as the actuator for the slider, but it didn't have the necessary range, so I used this instead. This will be the proper effect. The final cobblestone will sit at the end until Steve mines it, and then the slider will allow it to fall. I just had to get the U-joints to connect to this slider somehow. A bonus effect is that the cobblestone will only be allowed to fall once the alignment mechanism is in place, since the same motor runs both of these mechanisms. Okay, now the mechanisms are ready to run. I just had to build this huge dirt wall and a bunch of flowers, grass, and plants to cover the machine and make it look nice. Turns out I needed more brown parts, so I added some black pillars to finish it off. I set the machine to run and watch the satisfying result. Check this out. The cobblestone appears out of nowhere at the water and lava, and then it disappears after it is mined, just like in Minecraft. Want to see it at 5 times speed? Now that's oddly satisfying. The machine is really consistent, so even when this happened one time, the machine just kept on running since the cobblestones are cubes. You can push this controller button to hear how many cobblestones Steve has mined, and presumably kept in a chest nearby.
Steve, you have mined 281 cobblestone, that's 4 full stacks on 64, and a partial stack on 25.
When the mechanism is all covered up, it looks really cool and realistic. It looks amazing when the walls are removed too, and you can see all the mechanisms working. This is an enchanting table in Minecraft, and this is a real-life enchanting table built from LEGO parts. It has a book that can open and close, flip pages, and track the user.
Wow.
It also has an enchanting interface, with 3 enchantments available so long as the user pays enough lapis lazuli and has a high enough experience level. I'll show you all of this. First, I analyzed exactly how the enchanting table looks and functions in Minecraft so I could replicate it in real life. It enables a player to enchant items in exchange for lapis lazuli and experience levels. Besides enchanting items, the table has a book that spins around slowly. But when the user comes near, it opens the book, flips pages, and follows the user's movements. And it looks like this on the outside, so that's what I went for. Since the book is so iconic, that's the first thing I built. I used LEGO hinge bricks for the book cover so it can open and close. Cool, it actually feels like a book snapping shut. I built 2 pages to look like old parchment. Everything in this build will mimic Minecraft, so even the pages needed to have the blocky, pixelated look that is so recognizable. Once the pages were built, I attached them to the cover. Lastly, I made one more page that would eventually be able to move. It used some tan Technic parts that are kind of rare, but it was worth buying them so the colors were right. The back of the book has a bunch of connection points that I used to connect this spine. I set that aside for now and started working on an enchanting interface. Here's what I came up with. On the left, you can see there are spots to place items, lapis, and an ID card that will have the user's experience level stored on it. On the right, there are 3 options for enchantments costing up to 3 experience levels and 3 lapis. These buttons will allow the user to preview or purchase an enchantment. A tap and hold will cause the machine to speak the enchantment preview, while a quick tap will purchase the enchantment. I added this color sensor array underneath the interface. 1, so that a quick tap and hold motion can be detected, and 2, so that the user will immediately know which enchantments they qualify for based on the colors of the lights. Then I started working on how to detect items, quantity of lapis, and the user's experience level. An RFID sensor reads these RFID cards and RFID stickers, which go on 3x3 round LEGO tiles and then have an item sticker placed on top like this. After a little programming, this was the result.
Steve's experience level count currently at level 40. That's a netherite sword with no enchantments on it.
Nice, that's perfect. The sensor can even read through objects and from about 1 inch away, so the sensor can be hidden underneath the enchanting interface.
That's a lapis lazuli token with lapis on it.
I needed a way to have it read each token or card separately, so I got to work on that next. This simple mechanism is a great way to move an object in a controlled circular path. That's too fast, but if I slow it down, yep, that should do. After that was finished, I went back to making the book functional. The book will rotate until a user arrives, so it has to be able to spin without getting wires wrapped around itself. There are a few ways to solve that, but I picked the solution of connecting both the EV3 controller and all the motors to the same spinning platform. This motor will spin the platform. And this little assembly uses a worm gear to rotate 2 linkages that will open and close the book. Finally, a 3rd motor was added to flip the movable page back and forth. This book is supposed to track the user, remember? So I purchased a camera that the EV3 controller can communicate with and got that connected too. This was getting heavy, so I built a roller bearing using curved gear racks and a bunch of 1x1 round tiles. I didn't come up with this bearing design, but I've seen it done a few times in the larger LEGO community. I placed 1 orange tile so I could track movement of the rolling tiles if needed. I put the 2 halves together and gave it a test. The bearing actually worked amazingly well. There are the tiles rolling around. Ah, yep, there's the orange one. I added some pieces to make sure the 2 halves didn't come apart. After a little bit of work, I finally got the book connected, including the supports, linkages for the cover, and the U-joint for the movable page. Here's how they work. The enchanting interface and the book were ready, so I just needed to connect everything on the base plate and get the enchanting table's walls built. Speaking of the walls, I got to work on those, using some really fun and unique LEGO colors, like medium lavender, dark purple, dark red, medium azure, dark turquoise, light aqua, and more. Then, using the enchanting interface as a guide, I tiled off the base plate and added these bricks with grooves and door rails. Then I created the gear train that would work for extending and retracting the enchanting interface. The left side worked, but the right side hit the motor too early. Moving the gear train back one stud fixed that though. This section will blend right in with the walls of the enchanting table. I put the interface on and gave it a test, connecting at least a couple wires to make sure they wouldn't get pinched. The test went great. So now, here was the puzzling thing. Enchanted items in Minecraft have a purple gleam to them. How would I replicate that using LEGO bricks? Here's what I decided. I purchased some transparent purple stickers that I figured a robot could place on the tokens. Then again, it was hard enough for me to peel a sticker and place it, but I was up for a challenge. Here's the concept for how the robot will peel the stickers. By running the sticker paper over an object with a sharp angle change, like this lift arm, and keeping a lot of tension on the sticker paper, the stickers will peel themselves off the paper, just like this. Keeping that in mind, I got started on the mechanism to do that. Then I moved to creating my own LEGO compatible spools. These wheel hubs and 4 pulley wheels made for the perfect sticker spools. I needed one for the sticker paper that hadn't been used, and one to take up the excess paper. I connected them both on some axles and then worked on getting them added to the main assembly. Here's how I wound the stickers onto the new LEGO spools. I wouldn't be needing that anymore. Next, I checked with an item token to make sure it was in the right location. Remember how I said there needed to be lots of tension on the paper for it to peel? Well, instead of using tan pins without friction ridges, like normal, I used blue pins with friction ridges to provide resistance. This wall of Technic bricks allows a variable number of blue pins to be added to increase the resistance to the right amount. Next, I added a motor to run the sticker peeler mechanism. I used a worm gear to gear it way down so the torque was increased enough to overcome the resistance of the pins with friction ridges. Then I gave it a test. The first test didn't work out so well because the resistance was too small, but adding a few more high friction pins would end up fixing that issue. Now the stickers were peeling off like they were supposed to. Then it was time to add a way from the machine to place the peeled sticker on the item token. It turned out to be pretty simple. I just added a motor that would swivel a rubber bumper to press the sticker onto the token. I realized I should probably add some cable guards since several cables will be moving around near gears, so that came next. Everything was almost complete, but I definitely needed a way to store all the lapis that users spent on enchantments. So I built a lapis throne and put a machine lapis on it. The RFID sensor will take the lapis stored on the user's token and transfer it to the machine lapis token instead. That way the owners of the enchanting table can revel in all the lapis they get from users.
Yeah.
I added another EV3 controller to run the motors and sensors located in the base of the enchanting table, and finally got the book connected. I tried to keep everything in the base below a certain height, so the spinning platform wouldn't catch on anything. I had to lower a couple small things, but nothing too major. I already built the walls of the enchanting table, but I needed the top too, so I built these two halves, which will allow me to still remove the walls easily. Then I completed the build by covering up the book's mechanisms with a dark red cover like you see in the game. Of course, if we want to enchant at level 30, we're going to need 15 bookshelves. I used the standard design for most LEGO Minecraft sets. After some programming, it was time to run the 100% working LEGO Minecraft Enchanting Table. To start with, this is how the machine vision works for tracking a user's movement. I'm just walking along and, oh look, a random enchanting table. When the machine's camera sees me, the book will open and start tracking me. Here's the camera's point of view. It even followed me when I was done with the shot and was walking back to the camera. Now for the rest of the enchantment table. Let's see who stops by. Well, hello there, Steve.
XP level 40. 7 lapis. Unbreaking 1. Fortune 1. XP level 17 required. Silk Touch. XP level 30 required.
Ah, you bought Unbreaking 1, eh? Well, it's not the greatest, but we'll get to some better enchantments soon. The RFID sensor rewrites the RFID card and tag to decrease 1 XP level and 1 lapis. The enchantment process takes a bit, but are you ready to see how the robot did applying the enchantment sticker?
Enchantment complete. XP level is now 30, and remaining lapis is 6. Full enchantment is Unbreaking 1 efficiency 1.
Hey, the machine peeled and applied the sticker pretty well. After that user leaves, the book closes up and the enchantment interface returns to the table. While the drawer is closing, the RFID sensor rewrites the machine lapis token to add the lapis that the user paid. Okay, on to some better enchantments. Hopefully. Hey Zuri!
XP level 39. 4 lapis.
Going for a level 30 enchantment on a trident, I see.
Channeling.
Looks like Zuri wants a different level 30 enchantment. So what do we do in Minecraft? Dummy enchantments are the answer. This real-life enchanting table can do that too.
Enchantment complete. XP level is now 38, and remaining lapis is 3. Full enchantment is fire aspect 1. Loyalty 3.
It looks like that was the one Zuri was hoping for.
XP level is now 35, and remaining lapis is 0. That's about as useful as a gift card with no money on it. Full enchantment is loyalty 3.
It looks really cool with the table walls on, but there's a lot going on inside, so I'll show you the next enchantment without the cover. Remember, this is what's happening underneath the top of the enchanting interface with the RFID sensor detecting the user's card, amount of lapis, and item to enchant.
XP level 43, 64 lapis. Power 4. Now 40, and remaining lapis is 61. Full enchantment is power 4 Unbreaking 3 flame.
Wow, really? That's a pretty good enchantment.
Hello owner, here you go. Plus 8 XP levels and 8 lapis.
Yeah.
This is an automatic sugarcane farm in Minecraft, and this is one I just built out of LEGO parts, and it actually works thanks to a bunch of hidden mechanisms. This is the first automatic sugarcane farm that's ever been made out of LEGO parts, and you definitely need to see it. Welcome to Redstone in real life. The machine has a ton of accurate and awesome features, like sugarcane that actually grows, observers and pistons, flowing water, a hopper and chest, and more.
Wow.
I'll show you all of it. First, I made a plan for how to build this with LEGO parts. I need to create designs for dirt, water, and sugarcane. In order to make it infinite, the sugarcane will be half above ground and half below. I'd make an actuator lift the sugarcane to simulate growth. LEGO observers, pistons, and redstone will be added too. It will appear that the piston cuts the top section of the sugarcane, but really, the actuator will allow the sugarcane to fall back down at just the right moment row by row.
Wow.
A chopped sugarcane section will appear in the water and flow downstream until it gets sucked into a hopper and deposited into a chest. If the chest is opened, I want the machine to say how many sugarcane are inside. One of these sections is cool, but we can do better than cool. 5 sections ought to make this epic. The first thing I designed was the sugarcane, since everything else will be based on that. I considered using these lime 1x1 bricks, but the corners might have kept the machine from running smoothly. I switched to these lime 1x1 round bricks instead, so I won't be needing that. Delivery incoming. I didn't have quite enough lime pieces, but the lowest piece of each sugarcane will be hidden in the dirt anyway, so these will work. I started experimenting with the sugarcane pattern and eventually settled on this. After that, I needed to build the mechanism for the sugarcane to raise and lower, and a way to cover it all to look like dirt. 2 variations of these parts were made to attach brown pieces for dirt. Then I added these axles for attaching the sugarcane. They moved easily up and down, so I went forward with this design. The sugarcane model is in 3 stud rows, so 2 more of these were built. One with slight modifications since it was the middle row, and I finally connected them together. Now for the dirt. A combination of 1x1, 1x2, 1x3, and 1x4 brown bricks made this look a whole lot better. After testing, I could see that an actuator would be able to raise and lower these. I tried this parallel lift arm approach, and it wasn't too bad. I experimented with different lengths of lift arms and different platform sizes until I got a good combo. Next, I designed a chain-driven carriage to move the actuator around so each sugarcane can be raised independently. I started with this one, but didn't like it, so I made this one instead. Here's where the parallel lift arms were added, with a gear rack to allow the sugarcane to fall row by row. I used a long 32 length axle and this special sliding gear to enable me to keep motors separate from the carriage. That allowed me to keep a smaller footprint and make the carriage really fast since it was so light. Remember the chopped sugarcane section that has to appear in the water every time a piston cuts sugarcane? That's what this upper section was for. A single motor will run both sets of gear racks in opposite directions. That way, when the sugarcane falls row by row, the chopped section will just appear in the water. I was ready to start connecting these sub-assemblies together. I placed some Technic parts for rails, tiles for ease of movement, and of course the chain for the carriage. A motor and gear train were the final pieces of this section. A short test proved this would work great. I contemplated using magenta or blue for support bricks, but I like the idea of using red since it will give this whole thing more of a redstone vibe. These parts will keep the long axle from translating horizontally but allow it to rotate freely, just like a thrust bearing in a real-life machine. Next, I needed something to lift this platform to raise the sugarcane, but without attaching a motor to the carriage. So I gave this design a try, and it needed only minor modifications to work as intended. Motorizing it was easy enough. You can see that no matter where the carriage is, this motor will be able to raise the platform. Finally, I was ready to add the sugarcane subassembly, and as you can see, the design was starting to come to life all of a sudden. My hopper design sesh didn't take long. I threw out a couple of designs that had special functions but didn't look quite right. I added connection points to the hopper that will be hidden by other bricks, and attached the hopper under the final sugarcane section. The next thing to build was some water that looked like it was flowing. I got a little too ambitious for the amount of blue plates I had, which is very small, so I scrapped these models but kept some ideas like these stacked 1x1 round plates and various blue colors to make the water more dynamic. Don't mind the gray parts. They act as a guide for the chopped sugarcane, but they won't be seen. Attaching the water was easy enough thanks to some Technic parts, but of course that's when I realized that in Minecraft the water would flow over the hopper, and I wanted the hopper to be seen. So I added a wooden sign like this which blocks water in Minecraft. Once that was fixed, I tested it to make sure the chopped sugarcane section would automatically follow the angle of the water, which it did thanks to gravity and this low friction pin. Building a functional chest was tricky, but it turned out so nice. It needed to be hollow so its sensor could detect if it was opened and to house sugarcane, and also have a functioning lid. This was the start of my first design, which has some good features but isn't quite right. The second one built on that design and had a working lid, but things didn't line up and there was too much black on the edges. I also tried a bunch of latch types and didn't like any of them. I even tried one design that used primarily Technic parts. The small footprint was really the problem for all these designs. So naturally, I built a double chest to fix that problem. It looked really good, but it was also very functional due to being hollow, having a working lid, and even a place for sugarcane and one other special item I'll tell you about later. I added some parts to mount it and took the opportunity to mount a color sensor too. Eventually, the sensor will be programmed to monitor ambient light, which basically means the sensor realizes it's dark in the chest with the lid closed, but a sudden surge of light means the chest has been opened. Similar to the one I made for the working Cobblestone Generator, this is the design for the piston block. With a few minor changes, I made this one block connect to the other ones to increase the strength and ease of attachment. The design for the piston head is also about the same, but modified to connect multiple piston heads together. Once the pistons were completed, observers came next. Since I knew I was going to need 5 of them, I didn't bother making a single one and modifying it. The Technic lift arms are for eventually supporting the piston heads. The observer in Minecraft has a decent amount of detail to it. So at this scale, it looked a little stretched and funny, but there's still clearly a mouth, eyes, and the red light in the back. Plus, the sugarcane will cover most of the observers, so it wasn't a huge deal. The pistons and the observers would be mounted shortly, but first I needed to build the supports for them. Motorizing the pistons was next on the to-do list. I needed an interface for the motor, and I thought these would work fine, but upon testing, I realized they didn't have enough clutch power. So I designed this instead and gave it a test. Since that looked better, I went ahead and added the motor. This ended up being great, but I just had to try a couple other designs to make sure it was what I wanted. It was. In wrapping this build up, the long axle still hadn't been motorized, so I mounted one more motor, one large gear, a chain, and one more support. And yep, that did it. The last item was mounting the controller and wiring the motors, which was super easy. The mechanisms were all complete, and so I wrote a quick program and was about to run it when I realized something sad. I didn't have enough brown bricks to cover everything, but hey, that was okay because I used Technic lift arms instead, and they kinda looked like gravel or coal or something. To top off the model, I placed 1x1 tiles to look like redstone running from the observers to the piston. I also built a glass enclosure, but you can't see through these pieces very well with my camera, so forget that. You can watch right along with Steve while the sugarcane rolls in. Wow, that's so cool. A random sugarcane grows, gets immediately cut, and then the chopped section flows in the water until it gets to the hopper. Check out this part in slow motion. The sugarcane falls row by row just milliseconds before the piston head extends. Want to see it work at 5 times speed? Don't forget that you can open the chest. Not only is there a sweet light show, but then this happens.
See, you have 103 sugarcane in this chest. That's 1 full stack on 64 and 1 partial stack on 39. Incidentally, there's also 1 delicious looking baked potato in case you're hungry.
When the mechanisms are all covered up, the machine looks really cool and realistic, but it looks amazing when the walls are removed too, and you can see all the mechanisms working. This is a crafting table in Minecraft, and this is one I just made out of LEGO parts, and it actually dispenses real items in exchange for tokens. It reads the 3x3 grid of items and automatically knows what items to dispense. It'll then take the tokens and dispense huge items and other tokens that can be used to craft even more. You'll be amazed how this LEGO creation looks and functions, and I'll show you how I made all of it. I started by making a bunch of items to go inside the crafting table. There are all kinds of fun items here, including many iconic Minecraft items like a diamond pickaxe, an Eye of Ender, a bed, and an iron sword. At first I thought I would just dispense these large items, but it's way more fun to have tokens too, because a lot of recipes build on each other. Once that was done, I came up with a way to read tokens. I put special RFID stickers on 3x3 tiles, and then I printed out Minecraft icons on round sticker labels to put over that. Each RFID sticker has a unique ID, so this sensor can read them and know what item it is.
Gunpowder. Red wall.
The sensor can read from about an inch away, so it'll be able to read the tokens to the top of the crafting table.
Wall.
I got to work on the actual crafting table now, starting with the robotic arm, which will actually be kind of like a robotic forklift piston for this project. There's a ton I had to put in a small space, so I tried to build as tightly as possible. For example, instead of connecting 3 big motors to the robot arm, I used long axles and chain links to keep the motor stationary. The key to this technique is using sliding pieces, like this dark gray reel. So I built 2 of them into this forklift carriage. When one reel rotates, the main portion raises or lowers, and when the other reel rotates, a lift arm goes in or out like a piston. Items and tokens will be able to be dispensed using this. Lastly, I added chain links to get horizontal motion and connected the whole thing on sliders. The motors are stationary, yet they rotate the reels no matter where the forklift carriage is. This motor will power the horizontal movement. Without this U-joint and set of bevel gears, the gear for the chain links would have had to be connected higher, so I added them for compactness. Now it was time to add shelves for these items. These modular shelves work for tons of item types just by changing this one piece. That one works for a bed, this one works for a shovel. Cool! I even added blue axle with pin pieces so any shelf could be swapped out easily. I added several shelves, but I had to leave room at the top for the RFID sensor and a way to dump the tokens off the table, so I decided to use just some of the items. With that looking great, I started on some walls for the crafting table. The idea is that the crafting table will separate into 2 sections easily, which would allow for our secret door, sliding drawer, and more. Speaking of the secret door, I put that in right here. I used slopes and jumpers to decrease the height just barely enough to be operational yet practically invisible. I'll leave this section open for the sliding drawer. Now for the tokens. I tried out these shelves, but they couldn't fit very many tokens. And then I tried these shelves, but not every token could be reached by the forklift carriage. So I eventually decided to use this concept of alternating thin lift arms. Originally, I had 2 metal supports, but the tokens would catch sometimes, so I threw that one out. Adding the second shelving unit went quickly, and while I was at it, I added a short pin to stop the secret door at a specific angle. Now, how to get the tokens to fall from here down through the secret door? I figured a ramp ought to work, so I added transparent lift arms and tested it out. Yes, and oh, whoops. I would need to add more walls, so that didn't happen again. On to the sliding drawer. This will blend in perfectly with the outside of the walls, so I tiled it off with the right colors and added this plate as a stopper for the drawer. Then I threw together this drawer concept using plates with door rails and bricks with grooves. That drawer slides nicely. With some gear racks, it'll be able to be motorized. Some items needed a ramp to reach the drawer, but I didn't have much space, so I used this foldable ramp to meet the requirements. Looking good. The EV3 controllers were added next, being as tight as possible to conserve space. Then I added a motor to move the RFID sensor around under the top of the table, plus a second motor driving a worm gear to dump the recipe tokens into a container. While building the top frame, I used this angled lift arm to support the left side since the space above the drawer had to be left open for large items to fall. This special slider technique will allow this motor's chain links and the forklift carriage to change the position of the RFID sensor. Building the top of the table went kinda like this, but I ended up needing to change it slightly to include more of the outer edge. Now that the top of the crafting table was attached, everything was beginning to take shape. I got the tabletop attached to the motor with a linkage and tested it out. That worked so well, but I still needed a container for the tokens, so I built these two halves and attached them together. It's easier for the owner of the table to get the container out to enjoy all the spoils from everyone's crafting.
Yeah.
It's finally time to finish these walls and make it actually look like a crafting table instead of just functioning like one. These walls have the right details, including the items on the sides, which I believe are a hammer, a saw, and shears, but feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Here's the moment of truth. Will it all fit? Yes, perfect. That's oddly satisfying. It looks so good, and nobody would suspect that this thing would actually work. Now, I'll load up the items I've chosen to include for now, and also tokens too. Okay, it's ready to run. Here's my starting inventory. My main items are 1 oak log, 3 gold ingots, 3 sugarcane, 1 white wool, 1 blaze rod, 3 gunpowder, 1 beetroot, 1 ender pearl, 3 diamonds, and in my overflow are 2 red wool and 1 oak plank. I'll start with using the blaze rod. Here we go. I use the upper left corner for many recipes since the RFID sensor starts there. When it detects a token, it'll read the recipe for the whole table. After that, the table gets dumped. You all know what I get from a blaze rod. Here come some tokens. 2 blaze powder for the inventory. Now what's next? Here comes the first large item, an Eye of Ender. I'll use 3 gunpowder so I get flight duration 3 on these rockets. We all know rockets come in groups of 3, so I decided to drop 1 large rocket and 2 rocket tokens for using when I'm gliding with my elytra, of course. It looks really cool with the cover on, but there are so many moving parts that it's even more fun to watch when the cover is off. I'm about to leak a huge secret about Minecraft spawners. My quest started a few weeks ago when I realized that even though Minecraft has 170 million active users every month, nobody knew the secret of what went on inside the spawner. That is, until now. To reveal the secret, I built a huge Minecraft monster spawner out of LEGO bricks that actually spawns zombies. After watching this video, you'll know a secret about Minecraft that no one else knows. I began my real-life crafting session by looking at the walls of the spawner. I didn't have all these colors, but I came up with a good alternative. The spawner has 16 pixels on each side, which if I translated that directly to LEGO studs, I'd get a tiny build volume. So I doubled the length of each side to 32 studs and got to work on the spawner walls. I tiled it off to create the cage structure and the skull in the middle of each wall. This is such a cool yet crucial part of this build, since the spawner walls are such an iconic thing that Minecraft players would recognize. I had to get it just right. That looks spectacular. I needed 2 more of these so that I could have 3 sides of the cube covered with these walls so it looks like a spawner from the front, but when you look around back, you'll see all the internal workings. That worked out well. Next, I designed a zombie out of 14 common LEGO parts arranged like this. Wait, why didn't I choose a pig spawner? They're so much cuter than zombies. Okay, maybe not. Anyways, back to building the zombie. This looks incredible, except for the face. I decided to figure the eyes out later. I knew some of what went in the spawner, like the spinning zombie and the flames of course, but I was going to have to be creative with everything else. I started working on building a hopper to store the parts for the zombies. It's this size so that it can fit the large parts and the small parts. I used a special technique of short pins, half pins, plates, and tiles to fit each part into a track with just enough space for the parts to fall but not change orientation. I built a track like this for each type of zombie part and connected them all together. How oddly satisfying. Next, I needed a feed system for the hopper. I used a modular submodel of pulleys and 3-link beams. It was time to test it. The conveyor worked great, so I mounted the hopper on top of it. This system does 2 jobs at once. It conveys the stored parts from the hopper, and it also flips the parts 90 degrees to the right orientation as they are being conveyed. Finally, the first installation into the zombie spawner. The hopper and conveyor are cool, but there are even better things coming. The next thing I added was a stopper, so the parts wouldn't fall off the end of the conveyor. The stoppers needed to be less than 1 stud wide so that the zombie parts could be grabbed from the conveyor. 4 length bars worked well for that, so I went ahead and added the same submodel to each of the other conveyor sections as well. Then I loaded up the hopper to make sure everything was working. It all was, except for this one piece, but I fixed that. It was finally time to get this conveyor motorized. Each time a part was used, the motor refilled that slot from the hopper. It was perfect. The next item I needed was a stand for building the zombies. I used that same special half pin and plate technique to get the perfect height on these axles to support the zombie, but also let it be removed from the stand easily. This design was extremely effective. It was time to get this thing mounted. Easy enough. So the plan is to have a robot move the parts from the conveyor to the stand. Oh dear, hopefully the robot is better at this than I am. Spoiler alert, it is. After adding another support to the zombie stand, I was off to the next challenge of building something to press the zombie parts together. First, I created 2 separate press rams. 2 rams were required because of the axle supports in the zombie stand. Next, I created a smooth surface for the rams to slide on. Then I put together this motor and gear train. As this motor moves, the outer two rams actuate, and when I eventually connect the second motor to this axle, the inner ram will actuate. So I built this second motor mount and connected the two motors together. They're both geared down 3 to 1 to provide the necessary pressing force. Since it's a press, I added more structural elements to strengthen it. Okay, it was time to mount this new addition. I connected some wires and I tried it out. My guess was that this would do the trick. I was trying to keep everything as small a footprint as possible. So far, that's been pretty good. Everything was coming together, and I was getting super excited. As I added a couple more connection points for the press, I began to think about the last major item, the robotic manipulator. It would need to move parts from the conveyor belt to the build stand, hold parts during pressing, and move the finished zombie into the growth/teleportation chamber when it was finished. I began by working on the gripper itself. Rubber pieces on the ends will grab the part, and the motor will move this slide back and forth to grab or release the piece. Adding a rack and pinion will allow the motor to interface with this slider. I needed to test to make sure this gripper would work for 1 stud and 2 stud wide pieces, as well as short tiles. The test was successful for all of them, so I moved forward with this design. Next, I added a motor to the gripper. The gripper was done, and now I needed to add 3 axes of motion to it. I'll call the first axis the Z-axis. It will be for the gripper height. I used a series of bevel gears to interface with these gear racks. Okay, that was the first axis, now for the other 2. This one was easy, I just needed to connect the motor to move these gear racks. So I built a support stand for the main assembly. Then I attached a motor and short gear train to mesh with the gear racks. I wanted this whole carriage to ride on the track, so I added supports for that. It would ride along beams like this, which would be the final axis of motion. I built tracks for the carriage to ride on, and I used a LEGO chain as the interface from the large motor to the carriage. Unfortunately, the carriage tracks stuck out past the edge of the base plate, but it was a necessary compromise. It was time to connect the motor. I noticed a nice open space here, which would be perfect. Mounting the motor was simple, but then I had to drive this axle from here somehow. I built a small gearbox using a crown gear and connected the motor to the carriage chain. With the 3-axis robotic manipulator finished, there were only a couple of little items left. Mounting the controllers came next. Then I ran the wires using this wire management build technique. A light sensor came next. Now the spawner can tell if the lighting conditions are dark enough to spawn zombies. Here's a sneak peek of it working, but I'm going to temporarily turn off this feature for the video so you can actually see what's going on. Of course, the iconic spinning monster inside the spawner hadn't been added yet, so I used yet another motor to rotate a zombie around. And yep, like in Minecraft, it spins faster and faster as the time for the zombies to spawn gets closer. No monster spawner is complete without flames. I used a unique combination of white, yellow, orange, and red Technic parts and plates to get some nice looking flames. I mounted them inside the spawner. I added what I call the teleportation/growth chamber here. When zombies are finished being built, the robotic manipulator will place up to 4 of them inside this chamber, since in Minecraft up to 4 zombies spawn if the conditions are correct. This spawner is so close to being completed. Just a couple of finishing touches, including this satisfying time lapse of tiling off the base plate. I took a page out of my creeper video and mounted a dry erase marker to draw in the eyes. I may not be an artist, but a robotic manipulator should be able to do a little better. I mounted this here, but I'll spare you the details of how much had to be taken apart to do that. The spawner is finally ready to spawn some zombies. This thing is truly huge. It weighs in at over 8 pounds. For reference, here's a minifigure for my LEGO audience, and the controller and mouse for my Minecraft people. It's time to build some zombies. I removed the top and one sidewall so I could get good camera angles. I plugged in external power, and then I filled the hopper with some more parts. Everything is finally ready. For the first time ever, the secret of the Minecraft spawner is about to be revealed. Here it goes. The first couple of bricks are underway. Let's see if it can do a better job than I did earlier in the video. So far so good, but let's see how the press does. The taller the zombie gets, the more difficult it will be for the press to press the parts, because of instability, so hopefully this goes okay. It's looking good. Now it's time for the zombie's arms. That zombie stand is really coming in handy. Now we'll get to see how the outer press does its job. It worked like a charm. The zombie's torso comes next. Let's see how it works. And now for the other arm. By the way, if you like these videos, please subscribe. It helps me produce more content for you to watch. Thank you for watching and engaging with my videos. It truly means the world to me. Now, let's get back to the zombie. Both of the arms are almost complete. Finally, the brick that will connect it all together. Just a couple more parts, and this zombie will be ready to chase Steve till kingdom come. I can't wait to see the look on his face. Here's the special jumper plate that we'll use so we can put the head right in the middle of the zombie. Soon we'll get to see how the robot draws the eyes of the zombie. Hopefully it does a pretty good job, but we'll wait and see. Okay, here comes the moment of truth. How will the eyes look? They're not too bad, but not perfect either. I may have to do some fine tuning. The robot will rotate the head so the eyes are facing the right way. We're down for the last piece, and then this zombie is headed to the growth and teleportation chamber. Check this out. The zombie will go in the chamber with enough room for other zombies to join it. The rest of the zombies are getting ready to spawn as well. Now that 4 zombies are ready, the chamber will activate. The spinning zombie will spin faster and faster until the zombies appear in the world of Minecraft. Good luck, Steve! Yeah, thanks to our spawner, he didn't stand a chance. This is a furnace in Minecraft, and this is a real-life furnace built from LEGO parts. It has slots to place ingredient tokens and fuel tokens, a fire that magically appears during smelting, a slot where smelted items are dispensed, a card slot for users to gather XP from, and even an XP cannon that emerges from the top of the furnace and launches experience orbs toward the user. Wow. It's very accurate to the game, and I'll show you how I made all of it. First, I analyzed exactly how a furnace looks and functions in Minecraft, so I could replicate it in real life. It enables a player to turn items into something new by smelting them, like raw beef into steak or sand into glass. Fuel is required, which gets burned up. Once items have been smelted, the new item can be removed from the furnace, and experience is given to the player based on the item and how much of it was smelted. And the furnace looks like this on the outside, so that's what I was going for. Speaking of which, I got some pieces ready to build the walls of the furnace so I'd have a good idea of how much room there was to build the mechanisms. I left an opening where the fire would need to appear. I'd eventually have to add slots for items, fuel, the smelted item, and an XP card, not to mention the XP cannon. With the walls done, I was able to work on the roof. I left this section out so that I can incorporate the XP cannon later. After that, I started on creating the fire. I prototyped several garage door type designs. I tried these 2 weird looking track designs, but they didn't get me anywhere. Then I tried these for the garage door and made some better tracks for them to run in. They were okay, but made the fire look silly when appearing. So I used what I had learned and created these tracks instead. Then I used a combination of Technic with plates and tiles to create the fire. I built a couple sections to test it and then added the rest. During a test, I could see that it ran really smoothly, was compact, and revealed the fire much better than the prototypes. I added some Technic bricks so that I had a working surface above the fire and continually checked to make sure nothing would keep the fire from rising correctly. Then I got to work on a slot for fuel to be inserted. I used a special technique to get just the right height for the wheels above the fuel tokens. There isn't room for a motor here, so the wheels are connected to U-joints, allowing the motor to be connected farther away. This is how the wheels will roll a fuel token into or out of the furnace. I also attached an old RCX touch sensor so the machine can detect when a fuel token has been inserted. Let me show you a new type of servo motor I used in this build. These aren't LEGO motors, but they're compatible with Technic and are pretty small, which allowed me to cram even more functions into this furnace. LEGO's EV3 controller is the brains of the furnace. It sends commands to this Mindsensor's 8-channel servo controller to control the servos. I ran a test and was pretty happy with the results. Fuel gets sucked in by the wheels, and if there's leftover fuel after smelting, the wheels can return the remaining fuel to the user. Speaking of fuel, let me tell you how I got the tokens to work. An RFID sensor can read and write information stored on these RFID stickers, which I placed on the bottom of 3x3 round LEGO tiles. Then I placed Minecraft icon stickers like this dried kelp block on the top of the tile. The sensor can also read RFID cards, which I use for storing users' experience levels. Check this out.
That's a dried kelp block with quantity 1. That's an ancient debris block with 0 quantity. Writing new quantity of 15. That's an ancient debris block with 15 quantity. That's Sunny's experience level card currently at level 42.
A furnace has a ton of items it can dispense as smelted items, so I got some help and made a bunch of these tokens. The person who maintains this real-life furnace can choose how to fill up the furnace. It could be that the usual customers need to smelt items like sand and raw chicken often, so there could be more glass and cooked chicken. Or if the usual customers need a variety of items, then the furnace can be filled with basically every smelted item. Now that the tokens were ready, I began creating shelves to store them on. This small assembly was used over and over to create these shelves, which I connected to the main build. Those shelves were great for storing tokens until the furnace needs them. I added a transparent wall so the upper tokens wouldn't fall out, but I could still see through. Next, I added a ramp so the machine could dispense smelted items. The solution turned out to be simple, but I tried these slide pieces as well as normal slopes before getting to the final design. With that done, the machine needed a place to dispose of used tokens, like ingredients or fuel that's been used up. So I built this small box and got it connected near the storage shelves. It's easy for the owner of the furnace to remove the box, dump the tokens, and replace it. The next thing I built was a module for accepting ingredient tokens. It's very similar to the one for fuel tokens. Why fix what isn't broken, right? So I attached it near the top of the machine and gave it a test as well. I also checked to make sure the fire was still able to rise after all the additions. And speaking of the fire, I decided to get it motorized next. This assembly has 2 reels to pull the fire up with, and gravity will cause it to fall back down. After unwinding the reels enough and pulling the fire out the back, I used some half pushes to attach the string to the fire. The motor is geared up, causing the fire to rise quickly, so it feels like the flame jumps to life. With that accomplished, I was ready for the next challenge of being able to add XP to a user's card. I built an RFID sensor and bricks with grooves into this assembly, so that a user can insert their card and the sensor will add experience to the card. The perfect place for it was right above where the smelted tokens are going to be dispensed. That's a ton of functions built into a small space, but I did it that way so a robotic arm has enough room to move the tokens around. This is the one I designed for the furnace. It can move up and down, extend and retract, and grip tokens. This chain also allows it to move side to side. I tiled off the base plate and created the necessary structure to support it. This motor will move it back and forth by rotating the chains. This is how the test went. pretty good. And if I can move a token with manual controls, a robot will be able to do it much better. The machine is really close to being done. I just had to add another RFID sensor to read and write tokens. I tried designs like these, but there turned out to be a simpler solution. Then I connected the EV3 controller and the support that I used to keep all the wires out of the way. There was just one more function, and I'm sure you haven't forgotten what it is. The XP cannon. Experience orbs in Minecraft are various shades of green and yellow, so I used 1x1 round plates of various colors to represent that. LEGO has created a very cool launcher for these plates, and this is how they work. When the axle rotates, the round plates are launched one after another. So I worked on building a design that had a bunch of these launchers. This one was too large, this one was too complex. This one didn't have the axles pointing in the right direction, and this crazy idea was way out there. I finally settled on this modular design which has all the right functions, and it can be combined easily with more modules. So this was the result. Nearly 50 round plates can be fired from this launcher to simulate experience orbs being given to the player. Combining the launcher assembly with this is what makes it capable of rising out of the furnace to launch the round plates. A motor and gear train drive two linear actuators so they extend and retract, which you'll see in a moment. I connected support elements to the main assembly and attached the lifter/launcher combo. See all those launchers rotating?
Wow.
Just wait to see this XP cannon in action. The last thing to add was the battery box and servo controller. Then came the wiring, but I'll spare you the details on that. I was ready to put the cover on, but then remembered I hadn't finished the final portion of the roof. First I built this with modified plates to allow it to hinge. Then I added slopes along the back wall so there was only a tiny gap. I don't know about you, but I'd never guessed that this portion of the roof was different than the rest. Here's the moment of truth. Will the cover go on? Yes! A few hundred lines of code later, and this furnace was ready to run. Here's my inventory. There's 64 sand, 13 coal, 15 ancient debris, 1 dried kelp block, 6 birch logs, 28 rock copper, 11 dyed terracotta, 2 lava buckets, and 6 wet sponges. Here we go.
Insert ingredient.
Let's see what we can smelt with these items. I'll start with something we've all smelted like sand, and then move on to the cooler items.
64 sand. Insert fuel. 13 coal. Smelting process will complete in 10 minutes and 40 seconds.
Originally, I wanted the fire to bob up and down, but I'll have to add that feature into a furnace 2.0.
Smelting complete. 5 coal remaining. 0 sand remaining. Here's 64 glass. Insert XP card to obtain 6.4 experience from smelting.
Oh yeah, here comes the XP cannon. To extend the amount of times it can fire, I made it launch only a few XP orbs at once. But after I finish showing the furnace, I'll show you it launching them all in slow motion. So stick around until the end.
Have a nice day, Steve.
So we saw a basic smelting process, but now here's one where there will be leftover fuel. Let's see if it can be used.
15 ancient debris. 1 dried kelp block. Smelting process will complete in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Smelting complete. 0 dried kelp blocks remaining. 0 ancient debris remaining. Here's 15 netherite scrap. Insert XP card to obtain 30 experience from smelting.
This is so cool, it's just like playing Minecraft.
Have a wonderful day, Alex.
Wow, look at that. The leftover fuel from the dried kelp block can be used to smelt more.
6 birch log fuel will run out before smelting all items. Fuel will be exhausted in 43 seconds, so only 4 items will be smelted. Smelting complete. 2 birch logs remaining. Here's 4 charcoal. See you next time, Alex.
This is another cool feature. We just smelted birch logs into charcoal, and now we can use that very same charcoal as fuel.
28 raw copper. 4 charcoal.
Of course, just like in the game, the smelting process can be interrupted. If the user inserts their XP card during smelting, the process will be interrupted, allowing unused fuel and ingredients to be returned.
1 charcoal remaining. 4 raw copper remaining. Here are 24 copper ingots. Have a nice day, Fury.
The furnace looks really cool with the cover on, but there are so many awesome things happening inside that I have to show you the next one without the cover.
Terracotta.
Did you know something cool happens when using a lava bucket as fuel? Check it out!
One lava bucket. Smelting process will complete in 1 minute and 50 seconds. Smelting complete. Zero lava buckets remaining. Zero 9 terracotta remaining.
Sure enough, an empty bucket is returned. The same thing happens when smelting wet sponges, except a water bucket is returned instead.
Here are 11 placed terracotta.
The XP written to a user's card can be used on my Enchanting Table to buy enchantments. If you haven't seen that video, definitely check it out after this one. Now here's the XP cannon firing all its XP at once, first in normal speed and then in slow motion.
3, 2, 1.
I got these round plates everywhere. They're all over the room, down the air vents, and one even landed in my hair. Now, what am I going to do with all this XP? This is a LEGO machine that builds Minecraft creepers from scratch. It has 10 hoppers of LEGO bricks that feed an assembly line where each piece is assembled. The machine finishes a new creeper every 11 seconds. That's almost 8,000 per day. If that weren't enough, the creepers are then loaded onto a conveyor belt that drops them into a catapult to be launched. 17 motors all work in sync to make this happen. You'll be totally amazed, but Steve is not going to be happy. The final product is complex, so let me break down what is happening. First, I made a creeper, so I know what the factory would have to do. It uses just 10 common parts that you probably have in your collection. For the face, I printed a bunch on sticker paper. I tried a hole punch, but scissors worked better. With an idea of what the factory needed, I got to work. This first section will prepare the creeper's feet to connect to the main body. There are ramps for 2 hoppers and a tunnel so the 1x2 bricks can be placed under the 2x3 plate. I made a couple of tall hoppers so they could hold a ton of bricks. This design is adapted from my fellow builder JK Brickworks, who had a similar design for 1x1 plates. The transparent pieces will allow us to see the parts falling and alert us to when the hopper needs a refill. These parts keep the bricks from bunching up while inside the hopper, since they allow the part to just barely fit. They're easy to fill up by hand or with a tool that I'll show you later. Watch the pieces appear at the bottom when I drop them in. And here's what it looks like when looking through the transparent pieces. When the gear racks go to their retracted location, the slots are refilled thanks to gravity. Next, I needed a long conveyor belt. I tried these chains, these other chains, tracks, and more, but the creepers kept catching on them. So I settled on this instead. We're gonna need another base plate. There's a ton of functionality built into this custom conveyor. When the gears on top spin, the conveyor moves the creepers along, and the gears on bottom raise stoppers that will stop the creepers at each station on the assembly line. I'll show it to you with motors in a second, but before that, I started to prepare the assembly stations. I built a few variations of this same design. Since these parts will be pressed into place, we'll need supports in the vertical direction. I used transparent parts wherever possible, even Technic beams, so that the build process could be seen easily. This was the hardest challenge of this entire build. These all hinge right now, but I'll fix that later. Here's the main section of tiles the creeper will slide across. Okay, back to the custom conveyor. This long axle is connected to a motor and has lots of bevel gears on it. Once I get all the gears meshed on the right teeth, you can see that this motor controls the blue pieces to stop the creepers on the conveyor. Things are coming together, but there's way better things ahead. I can't wait until these creepers are built so they can hunt Steve with all their sneaky ways. Well, I ended up motorizing the actual rubber bands with this. As the motor rotates, all the bevel gears do too. They mesh with the bevel gears connected to the rubber bands. The benefit of using long axles like this is that each output sees a similar amount of backlash relative to the motor. It's an important building technique for machines that was key for this build. Let's test this. The creepers don't catch and they move along great, plus the stoppers work as planned. Time to add more hoppers and part dispensers, specifically for this section of the creeper. One goes on this side and a couple more on the other side. So check this out, as the feet and main 2x3 plate come out of station 1, they'll come to this station. Then tiles will be dispensed and pushed onto the creeper. But to make sure they are aligned, I added this. It lets the creeper go underneath, but aligns the tiles to the creeper. Here's another fun build technique. Plates with holes and tiles with holes allow Technic axles to be placed inside. Plus they have the right spacing for gearing. This will help with achieving the goal of using just one motor to dispense the parts for every station at the same time, except for the first station. I added a couple more gear racks and finished the gearing. Spinning one axle pushes both tiles onto the creeper at once. That's cool, but it gets way better. Hang tight to see it. More hoppers and gear racks incoming. These last ones are offset by a half stud so that the creeper head and 2x2 tile are still aligned to the center of the conveyor belt. This is looking great so far. Check it out. When this motor spins, every gear rack will push a part into each station of the assembly line, even for the one on the opposite side. Now that's oddly satisfying. The dispensed parts are going to need to be aligned too, or else they'll just shoot off like this. So I made a custom alignment wall for each station that will aid in the assembly. Time to get the rest of the press supports connected and fix that hinging issue. This piece helped, but it needed more, so I added these 3 Technic connector assemblies. Much better. I've talked all about the creeper parts being pressed together, but now I'm finally going to show how that's done. This assembly will move up and down. If bevel gears aren't the star of this build, these 2 parts would be. Just like the many round bricks, plates, and tiles you've seen throughout this build, these help to eliminate parts being misaligned. Variations of this design will be perfect for pressing each part. I attach them to the machine like this. Those look great. Each station needed very specific requirements for its press, so each of these had to be powered separately. I had a few NXT motors laying around, and they would be perfect for this. I connected them to the Technic frame and each press axle. Then I added these gears for proper spacing and for easy manual control when needed. Now that I had a better idea of what the machine would look like, I could finally motorize Station 1 using a medium motor and a chain. The machine is almost complete, but you know what we're missing? A catapult to fling the finished creepers into Minecraft to chase Steve. Don't worry, I'll tile off all these base plates to make them look nice. I needed another conveyor to lift the creepers into the catapult. So check this out. When the creeper is finished being built, it'll transfer from one conveyor to the other. After reaching the top, it'll drop into the waiting catapult. I actually explained exactly how this catapult works in my last video, so check out that video after this one. Here's the rest of the transparent hoppers for each type of creeper piece. Connecting those went pretty quickly. The last things to connect were the controllers, 3 EV3s and 2 NXTs. I connected these high up so that my camera could see all the cool workings behind the machine where wires wouldn't get in the way. The EV3s will communicate with Bluetooth, but I also gave this a try. It's a communication system using light sensors to send and receive signals. The main EV3 will communicate with the NXTs using this. 713 lines of code later, the program was done. I ran 5 power cords through this wire conduit so it wouldn't run out of power. Then I tiled it off to make it look nice. Here's one part going through the build first so you can see each station, and then I'll show you every station running at the same time. Let's get some creepers to each station and run the whole machine, and get the hoppers filled up too. Finally, time for the catapult. Ha! Take that, Steve. And that. And that. This is a shulker box in Minecraft, and this is a real-life shulker box built from LEGO parts. It's packed with features, including one I had to test by dropping it from a second-story window. More on that later. To open the shulker box, the user can use the built-in motion detector, ID card access, or even a key to enter a password. All the mechanisms are hidden in the floor, making it look magical. I'll show you the finished shulker box and also how I made it. Okay, quick recap on shulker boxes. They allow players to store items, and when the shulker box is mined, the items remain inside, unlike a normal chest that drops its items when broken. That's why I need to drop it from the window, to make sure this feature is working. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The coolest part of a shulker box is how it opens. The lid spins while opening and just floats there with no supports. How am I going to replicate that? First, I built the lid. It is one of the most recognizable features of a shulker box, so it needed to look just right. Once the corners were in place, I built some curved pieces into each edge to help with aligning the lid to the lower portion of the shulker box. See, in Minecraft, the lid can pass right through these sections of the box, but in real life, those sections are going to have to be pulled into the box so the lid can spin while it opens. So I kept that challenge in mind, but building the rest of the lid went on without a problem. Along the sides and top of the lid, I used some 1x1 Technic bricks to provide connections across colors, since this type of pattern would typically make this kind of build very unstable. I finished up the lid by creating a roof, connecting it to the rest of the lid and tiling it off to hide the gray plates and bring out the vibrant LEGO colors of blue, dark azure, and medium azure. With the lid completed, I moved on to the mechanism that would lift and spin it. One motor could have handled both functions, but there's a reason for keeping them separate that I'll show you later. The lid is pretty heavy, so I built a roller bearing with these 1x1 round tiles that will allow it to spin easily. I originally considered using this larger design, but that took up too much room, so I threw that design away, or should I say rolled. I only have these gear arcs in the dark tan color, but I added some cool blue pieces to hide most of it. So the bearing for rotating the lid is all done, but I needed this to lift it. It has transparent lift arms at the bottom, so that the lid appears to float, just like in Minecraft. It also has a worm gear to provide a lot of torque for lifting the heavy lid. Gear racks like these allow a rotating gear to move an object linearly, which is perfect for what I needed. There you have it, spinning motion and lifting motion. I started to design a way for these sections to be pulled into the Shulker Box, and kept each one separate so they could have different animations while the lid opens, which is cool because that functionality isn't required in Minecraft, so you will have never seen it before. It takes 4 of these sub-assemblies, 1 for each sliding section. They'll work by rotating something like this, but it's just an early prototype. With that part complete, I needed to get the controllers connected, which I used these awesome new pins with anti-stud pieces for. I put one controller here, and one there. They'll communicate using Bluetooth. Last but not least, I added a few ways for users to access the Shulker Box. This color matrix will be used for password entry. It can show individual colors in each square, so I looked up the HSV values for LEGO colors blue and dark azure, so it will blend in with the box walls until it is needed for password entry. Then I use this small motors encoder so that the user can enter the password by rotating a key left and right. Plus this old yet very useful spring-loaded part will always bring the motor back to center. Those barely fit, but I'm just glad that they did. On the other side, I added a motion sensor that has an RGB LED in it. The only problem is it lights up green when measuring distance, which would be confusing to the user, so I added a second sensor just for the LED. Finally, I added an RFID sensor too, which can detect users' ID cards through the walls of the Shulker Box, just like you've probably seen in my Enchanting Table, Crafting Table, and Furnace videos. And if you haven't seen them, you should totally go watch them after this one. With the wires looking like a mess, I got those cleaned up using a bunch of cable connectors. It looked much better afterwards. Plus, then the cables wouldn't interfere with any moving parts. Well, that's all the required functionality, so all that's left on the build is finishing the walls and covering up the mechanisms. I put together the walls for the base, and only had to modify them slightly when connecting them to the main assembly to adjust for the lights and password entry items. Oh yeah, I almost forgot the tool for password entry. It looks like a key, but really any axle will do, because it's more about entering the proper password sequence than having a key. Supports for the sliding sections came next, which conveniently also helped to hide some of the mechanisms. The sliding walls were built then, which didn't take long since I had already completed the motor and gear train portions. Final assemblies were built to hide the rest of the mechanisms. I wanted them to be easily attached and removed so the inner workings could be shown to anyone who was interested. I initially attempted magnets for that, but found an easier solution instead. Finally, it was time to connect the lid. It turned out to be trickier than I thought, but these Technic frames eventually made it work. Oh, and you'll notice I had to change out these slopes because they didn't work well for helping align the lid. Thankfully, I had some other sloping/curved parts and tried a bunch of them instead, finally landing on the design. Once the lid went on, the build was completed, and wow, I felt like it looked even better than I hoped it would. Let's see the normal functions of a Shulker Box before I drop it from a second story window. I'll start with the password entry. Normally these lights stay blue and don't show the correct or incorrect rotations, because that kinda defeats the point of a password, but I'll show it just for you. First I'll show an incorrect sequence. And now the correct one. Here's the original Minecraft opening animation, which looks super cool, but I programmed several other animations too. Now let's see what we have inside. Ah yes, gold and copper ingots, diamond and netherite scrap, and of course my life savings. Ah, did I hear you chuckle? It's more than just $1. There's a penny hiding under there too. Now let's close it up by swiping an ID card. Whichever way the owner triggers the box to close becomes the next method for entry. So the password entry won't work anymore, only ID cards will. Sorry Steve, you don't have access. Here's one of my custom opening animations. Now we'll close it using the motion detector so that becomes the next method for opening, which is cool because then anyone can open it. No password or ID card needed, which is just like it is in Minecraft. Ready for another custom animation? Tell me in the comments which animation you like best. You can rewind the video if you need to see them again. Before I drop this from the window to test if the box could actually keep items inside when broken, check out the machine with the mechanisms uncovered. It looks pretty sick. Now, to drop it from the window onto the cold, rough concrete below.
Yeah.
Here it goes.
Uh-oh.
3, 2, 1.
Ooh, let's check out the damage. Wow, yeah, that got obliterated. Oof, that final feature is going to need some work. I just made a working LEGO Minecraft minecart with TNT that runs on powered rails, straight and curved rails, and one more special rail that's key for a big boom. Minecart looks uber realistic, and it even speeds up on powered rails and slows down on normal rails. There's also a camera mount, so you'll get a first-person view of riding in the minecart. You just won't want to be in the minecart when it explodes. I placed rails all over my house so you can see it in action. Here's how this build went down a week ago. I'm going to start by creating a rail for the minecart that mimics this one from the game. This rail has some issues. It's 16 studs wide instead of 14, has stability problems, and turning is going to be tricky. I'll try adding gear racks to these hinged pieces. Yeah, no way that's going to work, so let me think. Way back in 2006, I bought a LEGO City train set that had these rails. They snap together like this and have wheels that ride along the rails. It even had a motor that fits perfectly on the rails. Now we're on to something. Making the rail 14 studs wide is a good start, so I'll build a ton of these, literally a ton, to extend the rail width. Then, of course, I'll tile it off to make it look accurate to the game. Yep, that'll do. I'll get to work building a bunch of these. Of course, the powered rail and the special rail are just modified versions of this rail. I will remove the dark tan tiles from the center and replace them with yellow tiles that run the length of the rail and red and dark tan tiles down the middle. Next, I'll build the frame and walls of the minecart. The minecart is 16 by 20 by 10 pixels with this cool pattern on it. So here goes my attempt with LEGO. Looking good. And here's a second one. The other wall is a little different, but not much. And 2 of those. Now we have the 4 Minecraft walls, so I'll build a frame next with this train motor as part of it. I'll connect the wire and give it a test. Whoa, too fast. And now slowly on the rails, super smooth. How about a longer set of rails? Perfect. I do want to keep the motor centered, so I'll add these. I also removed the battery cover because this little part hits it. Looks like those changes cause no harm. I'll add a color sensor to detect powered rails. I'm going to get this thing looking like a minecart now by adding those sweet walls from earlier. To do that, I'll need to build a frame and some kind of interface between these Technic parts and normal LEGO plates. Lastly, I'll wire up the color sensor before adding walls. Wow, those walls look so good, but the minecart isn't finished yet. I still need to add the TNT to make this thing really smoking. That shouldn't be too hard. I'll set up a base that fits into the top of the minecart. Now I gotta make sure to have TNT shown on the side. This is really coming together. Here's the moment of truth. Will it fit? Yes, let's go. Now I just need to program this to act like a minecart. We'll put some code here, a little code there, and done. So I need to make sure this behaves correctly on both powered and normal rails. Normal behavior looks like this. When going over a powered rail, the minecart will accelerate, but without enough powered rails, the minecart will eventually stop. So let's see how this LEGO minecart handles it. Awesome! The minecart will stop without enough powered rails. And now I'll test again with more powered rails. Yes, it accelerates over the powered rails. I'm laying a ton of rails around my house right now. I even put rails outside. Well, outside didn't work out so well. Hey, you wanted to see this explode, right? Ooh, how about one more time in slow motion? Ouch. Yeah, I'm going to avoid outside, but I'll continue laying rail around the house. There, the rails are all set. It's time to take a ride. You'll hear a countdown, which is for placing the TNT lid. Here it goes. Whew, that was fun. I'm gonna back that up a second. Now's a good time for me to tell you about this and this. The special type of rail I built is called an activator rail. It's used to prime a TNT minecart, which causes the TNT to explode. I built it just like a powered rail, except for red tiles down the sides instead of yellow. And this is a redstone block, which has two purposes. Most importantly, in Minecraft, it powers the activator rail, and it also stops the minecart at exactly the place we want, which of course is right inside Steve's house. Building it in LEGO took a lot of red pieces, so I made mine hollow. Now that we know about those two items, take a look at this scene again. Here's a real house, and here's Steve's little Minecraft house. Steve, can you point out the similarities?
Oh, sure thing. Well, let's see. Bed, rails, prime TNT minecart.
Wait, prime TNT minecart? Well, Steve just keeps dying. First from the working LEGO zombie spawner, and now this? Poor guy. This is a piston in Minecraft, and this is a massive real-life piston I built from over 7,000 LEGO parts. Wow. It works just like a Minecraft piston, including interacting with redstone components like buttons, levers, and more. All the mechanisms are hidden inside, but I'll show you everything. You also get the bonus of seeing 3 other blocks I've never shown before, and I'll use them to make sure the piston only pushes the blocks it's supposed to. I'm hoping this is the coolest video you see today, so make sure to hit like. Let's get into it. Because it moves, this is the most important part of this build. I took notes about color and how many pixels each section has. The first thing you should know is that pixels in Minecraft match to LEGO parts pretty easily. A brick with a plate and a tile creates a LEGO pixel. Of course, the tricky part is matching color because of all the different shades, but if we take the general look of a block, usually there are LEGO colors that match. I picked dark tan, light bluish gray, and dark brown. Now that I know how to make the block look just like Minecraft, here's how I'll get the piston to actually move. I'm going to use a fairly new LEGO part that is perfect for this kind of mechanism. When the motor rotates, the screw moves this black block with the red tile up and down. I figured the piston would be heavy, so I added 4 sets of screws to distribute the load. Of course, I forgot that the screws should be supported on top, so I changed my first design to leave room for supporting beams. With that done, I started building the walls of the piston's connecting rod. That's this part, in case you're wondering. It needs to be hollow so the screws can rotate inside. But here's the thing, that doesn't make for a very strong build. Unless you use the SNOT technique. Yes, I said SNOT. No, I don't mean the stuff from your nose. SNOT stands for studs not on top, like this piece that has studs on the side. By interlocking bricks normally and using SNOT, you can create a very strong structure, even if it's hollow. That worked great on this side, and I'll use modified plates on this other side to get the same effect that SNOT has. See how the walls are going to collide with this modified plate though? Unfortunately, there isn't enough room here. Thankfully, LEGO has panel pieces, which look like normal bricks on one side, but have cutouts on the other. This will give the space needed. Also, remember how the piston can push some blocks but not others? There's going to be a sensor in the piston that allows it to read what block is in front of it, so I need to run a cable inside this connecting rod. Thankfully, there's enough room behind the panel to do that too. I put together several more sections and connected them. Looking at the outside, you'd never know this was hollow, but with 4 screws, snot pieces, and a wire running all the way through, there's no room left. With that done, I started designing a strong frame for the rest of the piston. This is what I came up with. It's strong yet hollow to keep the piston as light as possible. I created 2 since one will be used later. I wanted the bottom of the piston to have a smooth finish and not show the bottom of the bricks, because that's what you see in Minecraft. Normally, you could use inverted tiles to do that, but those pieces aren't made in all the colors I needed. So instead, I used brackets to flip the direction I was building so I could use normal tiles instead. Wow, look, the piston is really starting to take shape. I added several more layers of bricks, always making sure that any part that would be seen on the outside was the right color. As I neared the top, I added an RFID sensor so the piston can detect what block is in front of it. That way it'll know if it's allowed to push that block or not. I finished the inside structure by adding the other Technic frame and using a technique kind of like Snot, except with Technic parts instead. In hindsight, I do not recommend this exact design because of how tricky it was to connect, but at the same time, the principle I used here makes a build extremely strong, so in some cases it's worth it. Finally, I tiled off the top of the piston to make it look just right. It's so cool. And check this out, if I hadn't used the Snot technique, there is no way I could shake the piston like this. In fact, here it is again with the snot pieces removed. Yep, that's what I thought. Before moving on, let's make sure the piston can detect blocks in front of it. Here are 2 other blocks I made. This is a lodestone, and this is a birch log that's still a work in progress. They're a smaller scale than my normal blocks, but they'll work for this test. They both have an RFID card inside that can be detected by the piston. Remember, a piston cannot push a lodestone, but it can push a birch log, so let's just make sure it can detect them correctly.
That's a lodestone, but I cannot push it. That's a birch log, and I can push it.
Cool, that'll be perfect. Next, I put together the piston housing, following the same pixel and color ideas I used for the piston. I used Technic bricks on the corners so that the places where colors don't overlap would be stronger. With the housing ready, a new problem made itself very apparent. Ah, Steve, you're as bad as a creeper when you hide like that.
Yeah.
Back to the issue at hand. You probably expected this because in Minecraft you can see that the connecting rod is 16 pixels, while the piston housing is only 12. I wanted to have the piston travel the length of a full block, so I had to come up with a plan to fix this issue. My first thought was that pistons are often placed on other blocks in Minecraft, so I decided to use chiseled stone bricks since they match the color scheme of the piston and you can still tell it's a distinct block from the piston. After modeling the chiseled stone brick block, I decided to start working on the piston's functions. Now remember, the piston is hollow, yet it still has over 2,000 pieces and weighs about 2.5 kilograms or 5.5 pounds. That's pretty heavy, but I was just sure there'd be a way to lift it. So I got some motors and got to work. The first thing I realized is that all 4 screws needed to rotate in sync with each other. Here are 2 synced screws. If one of them skips a tooth, like I just simulated there, things start to get more and more out of whack until something breaks. With that in mind, I put together an initial design using 2 worm gears, but there were a few issues. First, I didn't gear down the motors enough to give them the power to lift the heavy piston, but they could lower it with the help of gravity. Second, when lifting the piston, the gears could slip and cause the screws to get out of sync. And finally, the weight of the piston on the screws causes the whole thing to twist, and that's a bad thing. So on my second design, I needed to fix those issues. First, I doubled the motors for more power. Then I doubled the gears to mitigate slipping. Finally, I built a strong container for the piston to keep it from twisting. Here's how the first test went. To my surprise, it was actually a huge success. Now, remember how I mentioned that I want this piston to work with buttons, levers, and other redstone items? I thought of a really fun and cool way to replicate that. I use this device to detect which redstone mode a user wants. 4 modes can be selected, which I'll show you later. When the user presses this button, the piston will activate in whatever mode is selected. Now here's an interesting challenge. A Minecraft piston can be oriented in several different ways, horizontally, vertically pointing up, and vertically pointing down. I wanted to replicate that too, so I needed to add braces that will support the piston container when the piston is horizontal or even upside down. The piston is getting very close to being finished. I wired everything up so the EV3 controller can communicate with the sensors and motors. With the wiring finished, it was time to finish the piston's walls. Remember the chiseled stone bricks? Those come first. The piston walls will go above the chiseled stone bricks, just like when a piston is sitting on a chiseled stone brick block in Minecraft. Lastly, I added some stickers to help the user know what mode they are selecting. I wrote 200 lines of code using pybricks and MicroPython, and then the piston was ready to go. Okay, here's button mode. It should extend for a moment and then retract, but not if there's an immovable block in front of it. Lodestone cannot be moved, for example, but birch logs can. Here it goes.
Nice try, but lodestone can't be pushed by a piston.
Yeah, you're out of here. Alright, awesome. The next mode is lever mode, which I'll test with the piston in a different orientation. The piston should extend and remain extended until I push this button again to deactivate the simulated lever. Let's see it work. That worked great. Before I get to the coolest mode, here's Observer with Copper Bulb mode. It's a variation of this simple circuit. When a movable block is detected, the piston should extend, and when the block is removed, it should retract.
The rules haven't changed, silly. Lodestone still can't be pushed by a piston.
Ha, nice try. Ah, so cool. Finally, here's Redstone Dust mode. See, in Minecraft, we don't have to be anywhere near a piston to activate it. So I have a remote here, and I can select the mode and activate the piston without being anywhere close. Wow, that's so fun. The final test will be if the piston can be flipped upside down and still work, just like it does in Minecraft. Yes, it does. This poor Steve just refuses to sleep, so these flying, death-breathing, undead phantoms are chasing him. And this is that same iconic scene recreated with motorized LEGO parts, complete with a flying phantom chasing Steve, who runs around madly dodging water and lava, but clearly not spending any time sleeping in his bed. If you've seen my other recent Minecraft videos, you'll love this one. I started by building Steve. No, way bigger than that one. Still larger. That's the one. This mechanism is hidden inside that allows him to swing his arms while his legs are running, just like in Minecraft. Now for the head. With that looking awesome, it was time to tackle the Phantom. Making a flying Phantom out of LEGO bricks was tricky, but thankfully not impossible. Here's how it came together. The Phantom's wing has two distinct segments, and its tail does also. This small model shows how I attempted to achieve that motion. Any movement in the first segment is copied to the second segment because of this gear rotating around this other fixed gear. The motion is quite good, but there was unequal amounts of gear tooth backlash for each wing, so this wasn't going to cut it. So I switched to a design with equal backlash and figured I could transmit motion with these cylinder-like pieces. This design was definitely getting somewhere. I even created the tail proof of concept too. The only problem was how small everything was. I wasn't going to be able to create a good looking Phantom like this. That's when I scaled up the design. But that would mean using these huge gears. Instead of those gears, I designed a better approach using a chain, which keeps the gears at this size no matter the size of model. I was sure this was it. Even the tail is looking better. Nothing else could go wrong, right? Well, it turns out these gear teeth kept slipping because the wings were too heavy due to the large size. I only had two options left. One, use a linkage. Nope, that usually threw the wings way too far. Or two, support the Phantom from above and use a system of pulleys, reels, and hopefully invisible string to achieve the desired motion. I picked that option. Taking all that I had learned from my failed designs, I created this. You're gonna love it. Not only does it look really good, but it also has the hidden wing and tail functionality that will make all the motorized Reels jobs really easy. With Steve built and a Phantom to chase him, I was off to build some Minecraft terrain that loops forever, so it really looks like Steve is running like crazy to avoid the Phantom. Sections of water, dirt blocks, grass blocks, lava, and sand were added to make a varied terrain. With that done, I was ready to create a structure on which to attach everything and the motors to run them. I threw down some tiles for the terrain to run smoothly over, and then started preparing the sprockets for the terrain tracks. I made this frame heavy duty to handle the weight of all the tracks, lift arms, pins, and plates. Two large walls were used to attach it to the main base plate. It was time to install the tracks. Turns out I was overzealous in my design, and so I had to get rid of some tracks from each side. Remember, Steve is much larger than usual, so the whole middle portion is just 1 block wide in Minecraft, and I chose to show half of each block to the left and right, just to give more detail. Finally, they were connected together to create some endless terrain for Steve to run over. The next thing to do was motorize the terrain. I used 2 old NXT motors coupled through a differential to significantly increase torque without reducing speed. This terrain is supposed to breeze by because Steve will be running away from a Phantom. You can see how when the motors run together, it works much better than with just one. Needing some extra room, I added a couple more small base plates to the main one. It was time to build a very tall yet durable frame to hold up both Steve and the Phantom, and create a place to attach all of the pulleys for the Phantom's movements. Yeah, the frame's gonna have to be taller than that. Structures aren't my specialty, but adding these lift arms to make triangles makes this act kind of like a truss, I think. Structural engineers, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. If I'm right, you should subscribe, and if I'm wrong, you should definitely subscribe. Yep, okay. Glad we cleared that up. A nighttime vibe would really make this scene. I added a moon, clouds, stars, and a perspective shot of faraway hills and trees, and one more key item, Steve's bed that's very clearly not being used. Now our frame just needed supports on the sides and more truss-like thingies. And of course, a top to connect all the frame sections together. Attaching Steve was next on the to-do list. One change I made was to add 2 transparent round bricks because all the corners on the arms and legs kept catching. Now they don't. I also used some of these cool transparent lift arms to make it appear that Steve isn't being supported at the top, but rather standing on the ground. Of course, there's actually a tiny gap. More structural supports. And okay, it was time to motorize Steve so he could run away. I made this section out of black, gray, and white parts to hide it against the night picture we just made. As this piece oscillates, the mechanism inside Steve will cause him to run. Adding a motor finished this part up. He's running a little slowly, but I'll speed it up as much as I can in the program. All I needed was a motorized reel. I built 4 of these and mounted them to the back frame. I attached the controllers and some sensors during this process too, since the Phantom would need to initialize every time it started up. I actually considered using light sensors instead of touch sensors, but the alignment during initialization really wasn't as good. I also experimented with different lengths of offsets from the touch sensors, but just a single transparent round brick was sufficient. Now, back to the exciting part of the Phantom attachment. This build is all possible with LEGO brand string, but I decided on some clear fishing line to make the Phantom really look like it's flying. The fishing line is 0.15 millimeters in diameter, which is so small. Yeah, you can't really even see it here. I got a green base plate to show you. I wrapped 7 of these LEGO reel pieces with the fishing line and got the Phantom attached, including the reels on the motor subassemblies in the back. Attaching the Phantom was really rewarding. Just wait until you see this thing chase Steve, flying up and down and flapping its wings and tail. You can see what happens as I manually rotate each of these motors. I'm not a good puppeteer, but I'm an alright engineer, which makes me a much better puppeteer if you know what I mean. I finished up by plugging in wires, building a case, and covering the rest of the mechanisms. The Phantom will initialize by using the touch sensors to align its front and back halves for level flight. At last, it was ready to run. During flight, the tail will do 2 beats for every 1 beat of the wings, just like in Minecraft, and the speeds are the same too. The Phantom will hover, flapping its wings a random number of cycles, and the tail always keeps in sync. Then suddenly, the Phantom will swoop to a new height, presumably to monitor Steve, or to attack. You can almost see the terror on Steve's face, his mouth open in a silent scream. Okay, I admit that was dramatic. Here's some footage of just Steve and the ground. Looks pretty real to me. And also some footage of just the Phantom at 10 times speed. All of those pulleys are super satisfying to watch. And seeing the motors do their job is pretty fun too. It looks great with the case on, but you also need to see that infinite ground break away, not to mention the differential and the oscillating mechanism to make Steve run. I want to keep creating these videos for you. The best way you can help me is by sharing this video on your social media. You're the reason videos go viral. Check out my other Minecraft builds too. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment to let me know you watched. Thank you so much.